start again. In our last tape, we talked about the sources of law, the definition of law. What's important is to write this down and make sure you keep it in your notes. There is no all-encompassing, E-N-C-O-M-P-A-S-S-I-N-G, encompassing definition of law. In other words, there's no permanent definition of law because law changes as we change. So therefore, the law has to be flexible. The primary source of law in the United States is the U.S. Constitution, the state constitutions for each state, international treaties. When we enter into an international treaty with another country, that treaty becomes part of our law, and administrative law. Now, all law fits into two categories. The first is called civil law. Please take this down. Civil law is that area of law concerned with the protection of private and individual civil rights. Its purpose is to protect individuals, businesses from harm caused by the state, other individuals, and businesses. Number two is called criminal law. Now, criminal law is different than civil law, and criminal law is that area of law concerned with the administration of penal justice, P-E-N-A-L, penal justice. Its purpose is not the protection of the individual, but the protection of the state. Therefore, and please note this, individuals may not prosecute crimes. Now, all law is either civil or criminal, and sometimes laws are both criminal and civil, so that if you get robbed, you can sue the robber, even though they go to jail. Now, this is important. The law imposes an affirmative duty on all citizens to know the law before they act. In other words, ignorance of the law is no defense. The law requires you to know what you're doing before you do it. Now, law can be found in different places. Okay? The number one place is called statutory law. Statutory law is simply the law written down. It is those laws enacted, E-N-A-C-T-E-D, by legislative bodies such as Congress, state legislatures, and local governing bodies. These laws, if enacted by Congress and state legislatures, are usually called statutes. Laws enacted by local governing bodies are usually called codes or ordinances. New York City is governed by the New York City Administrative Code. Now, the key to any statute, ordinance, or code is two components. The first is called substantive law. Substantive law defines the substance of one's legal rights and obligations. In other words, it tells you what you can and cannot do. Number two is called procedural law. Procedural law defines the procedure to be used when enforcing legal rights and obligations. Whenever you look at a statute, code, or ordinance, you want to make sure that both components are there. For example, a lot of times legislatures, to satisfy people, will pass a substantive law, but not procedure. An example of this is the 1962 Civil Rights Act passed by President John F. Kennedy. It said that you couldn't discriminate against people, which was substantive, but it didn't contain any procedure if you were so discriminated against. That's why the most important law is the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which says that you can't discriminate against people on the basis of race, creed, national origin. And if you are discriminated, the procedural part allows you to sue. You can win either on substance or procedure. Our next source of law is called case law. And I hope that you are reading our case, Regina versus Dudley and Stevens, because that's an example of case law. Case law is that law which develops from a particular case before the courts. The following of the case law by other courts is called the doctrine of, now this is where we start learning Latin terms, stare, S-T-A-R-E, decisis, D-E-C-I-S-I-S, which means following legal precedent, following what went before. Legal precedent provides, stare decisis and legal precedent provides continuity in the law, so that if you go to court with a problem similar to someone else, then you know that probably the court will rule the same way the other court ruled, but they do not have to do. Our next place for law is called equity, to make things equal. Equity is a system of remedial justice, where the focus is on right, wrong, fairness, and justice rather than law. So if you look at divorce and alimony, that's based on equity. Now, the other thing is called the common law. Now, we have two definitions of common law. One is called the traditional, and that is a body of unwritten principles based on the customs and usages of the community. These unwritten principles and customs have the force of law. In other words, certain laws develop because of how we live and where we live. For example, there are certain laws in New York that are not in other states. Why? Because these laws, these customs and laws are common to the people of New York City. The second definition of common law is that law which existed before the development of the United States legal system. The United States is an English common law country. Before the creation of the United States, what we know as the United States, was ruled by England. When we have a problem in our law that we don't have an answer to, then we look to common law of England. For example, years ago, we had a crooked president. Okay. We never thought we would have a crooked president. And so we had no laws for crooked presidents. The president at that time, Richard Nixon, claimed, which must sound familiar today, that he was above the law and he could not be prosecuted. Well, we look to English law, and under English law, the king is not above the law. So if a king is not above the law, clearly a president is not above the law. Now, let's take down these definitions. The first one is called felony. F-E-L-O-N-Y. And a felony is any crime punishable by more than a year in jail. So if the crime carries a sentence of more than a year, then it's a felony. It doesn't matter what the court gives you, it's how much time the crime carries. Number 2 is called a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor is any crime punishable by less than a year in jail. So if all you can get is less than a year in jail, then it's a misdemeanor. Now, why is it important? Well, if you're convicted of a felony, you're prohibited from doing certain things. In some states, you can't even vote. You can't get certain kinds of jobs. With a misdemeanor, you do not have to report your record because you can't be denied a job or any other thing because of conviction of a misdemeanor. Our next thing is called a violation. A violation is not a crime, but it subjects one to a fine, a penalty. Whenever you're given a desk appearance ticket, it's usually a violation. So if you throw paper on the street, it's a violation, not a misdemeanor or a felony. Now, what's important too is that we look at real property. Real property, R-E-A-L, real property, is land, buildings, trees, soil, minerals, timber, plants, crops, and those things permanently attached to the land. Now, what's important about real property? Real property is the basis of all wealth. Our next thing is called personal property. Personal property is any property that is not real property. If you want to be rich, you want to accumulate real property. If you study things, when most people immigrate to this country from other countries, the first thing they do is buy land, because land is wealth. Americans get money and the first thing they buy is a car, big screen TV, which is personal property. To accumulate wealth, you want to accumulate real property. Real property has been the basis for war, because what is war fought over? It's fought over land. Our next thing, and this is very important to me, is called chattel property. Now, why is this important? Chattel property is individual personal property. If we study slavery, we know that slavery has existed since the beginning of man. There have always been slaves. In every religious book, there's been slaves. If you study the words of Jesus, Jesus never condemned slavery. He just said, treat your slaves well. If you read the words of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he never call for the end of slavery. He just set down rules for slavery. So slavery has always been accepted. You get conquered, you got made slaves. But slavery in the U.S. has caused more problems because it's the only country in the world that practiced what is called chattel slavery, where slaves were not human beings, but simply personal property. Because they were personal property, you could do with them what you wanted. You could kill them and not go to jail. You could sell them, take their children, rape them, because they were your property, as opposed to being human beings. That's why African Americans could never get over slavery in this country, because this is the only country that ever practiced chattel slavery, where people were considered just property. For example, New York ended slavery in the 1820s. The reason New York ended slavery in the 1820s is not so much about a moral question, but about something that happened. A man came home, he killed his wife and all of his kids. Everybody knew he did it, but there was no evidence to show that he did it. But someone saw him commit the murder. That person was the family slave. But he could not testify in court. The reason being that he was property, and property could not testify. It so outraged the citizens of New York City that they passed a law ending slavery in New York. So I bring this up because, as you know, we're dealing with a very big crisis in this country, and its origins come from the notion of chattel slavery. Please study this. And please make sure that you read Regina versus Dudley and Stevens, and that you read the 3 theories of law.